Masachas Sotah Daf Mem Tes. On the bottom of Daf Mem Chesam Beis, the Gemara discusses that the Mishnah said before, the Mishachor v'Abayis Posku Anshe Amono, and the Gemara explains that's referring to Elu Bnei Odom Shemaminim B'Kadosh Baruch Hu, and Rashi explains what does it mean Shemaminim B'Kadosh Baruch Hu. That means that Mevate Mimamoinam for Tzedakah and for Hiddur Mitzvah and for Kovod Shabbosus and Yom Tovim. Biskarov brought in the stencils over here that points out the tremendous point from this Rashi that you see that if somebody is not generous in giving tzedakah, is not only chesorin in the mitzvah tzedakah, rather it's a chesorin in his amunah if he's not mevater from his moment to give tzedakah v'ayin sham. Moving further on, the Gemara says, Alma Amar Mekayim, what is Mekayim the world? Akadusha the Sidra, Vayheshmei Rabba, Dagadeto. And the Beersheva that's Mayrich is that specifically Yeheshmei Rabba, Vagadeto, even Yeheshmei Rabba after other limudim that's not Agadeto. And it brings from the Rambam that's Mavur, the Huadin, other limudim, and the Chiddush is even Yeheshmei Rabba Dagadta. Rashi says, what's the chashivas of Kedusha de Sidra? Because it has Tarti, it has Talmud Torah, L'Rabim, and also it has Kedushas Hashem. So since Ispa Tarti, so therefore it's Chovev B'Einei HaKadosh Baruch Hu. Ein Sefer Birchas Shai that asks, what's the understanding in this Rashi? And he has two stronger oros on this Rashi. He says, first of all, there's a tremendous discussion in Orach Chaim Simmem Zayin. If one has to say Birchas HaTorah before he says Psuki de Zimra, since the Psukim he's saying B'Torah's Tefillah and not B'Torah's Talmud Torah, so therefore it could be you don't have to say Birchas HaTorah beforehand because it's not considered Limud HaTorah, it's considered Tefillah. So he says over here also, when you're saying Uvalutzi and you're saying it B'Torah's Tefillah, not B'Torah's Talmud Torah, so why is it considered Talmud Torah the Rabbim? And he asks another kasha that's Mavur in the Shulchan Aruch Rav, that there's a tremendous difference between the mitzvah of Talmud Torah by Torah Shebiksav and Torah Shebal Peh, because the Shulchan Aruch Rav is Mavur that Torah Shebiksav, even if one doesn't understand what he's saying, nevertheless it's a key mitzvah of Talmud Torah. However, by Torah Shebal Peh, it's only if one understands what he's learning, he's Mekayim a mitzvah. So the Birchas Shai is, if that's the case, then it's tzorchian. Why is it only considered Talmud Torah? Because you're saying the Targum and explaining the words of the Torah, even without explaining it, should be considered Talmud Torah. So the Birchas Shai says it could be that one teretz answers the other, that since you're saying Uvolitzi and Derech Tefillah, so therefore it's not choshev, as if you're saying it for Talmud Torah, if you wouldn't understand it, and specifically because you metargum it and you're explaining it. So therefore it's nicker that it's being said for Talmud Torah and has the chashivas of a mitzvah of Talmud Torah as well. I'm in the Sefer Nesiv HaKodesh that explains what's the understanding in this Rashi that is Talmud Torah, the Rabbim, because everyone's saying Uvolitzian. And he says, we find that when this Talmud Torah of the whole world, it's a different level of Talmud Torah and it's more choshev than a regular Talmud Torah. And he says it's Mavur in the Gemara and Megillah Daf Gimel that Talmud Torah the Rabbim is greater than Avodah. And the Magen Avraham learns that it's specifically Talmud Torah of the entire Klal Yisrael. However, Talmud Torah that's not of the entire Klal Yisrael is not as choshev as Avodah. And he says you see that Talmud Torah of the entire Klal Yisrael is a whole different level and independent chashivas of Talmud Torah. So he says that could be the understanding in this Rashi as well, that since the entire Klal Yisrael is saying this Torah every day of all it's seen, so therefore it has independent chashivas, and therefore the world is mekayim specifically on Kedusha de Sidra. Moving further on, the Mishnah says, Mishemeisi b'yechid men zakai botlo ziv hachochma. Rashi says, Zelo yadana maihi. The Taisis Yontif asks, what's the understanding in Rashi? Why does Rashi say Zelo Yadana Maihi? What's Ziva Chochma? Why is it different than that Rashi says further? By Ziv Kahuna, who was a Chochem that's a Osher, and he had many of Ochev HaKoyanim eating on his table, and that's considered a Ziv HaKuno. So why specifically did Rashi say by Ziv HaChochma Lo Yadana Maihi? I'm the Shurim from Michael Feinstein. The answers Rashi, the why specifically by Ziv HaChochma, Rashi says he doesn't understand what it is. He says, according to tremendous Yesoid, that's Choluk Bi Yesoid, Kovid HaTorah, and Kovid of Avodah, Kovid HaTorah is Ruchnius specifically and doesn't have any Sheikhis to Gashmias. However, Kovid Avodah has Sheikhis to Gashmias, and he said he heard from Baron Kodesh Zechoyim Levracha what's the understanding and the difference between Har Sinai and the Beis Hamikdash. By Har Sinai, after Matan Torah was bottled, the Kedusha of Har Sinai entirely, and everyone was allowed to go onto Har Sinai. However, by the Beis Hamikdash, after the Churban Abayis, it still retained its Kedusha. And Rav Aaron explained the difference is because Torah is entirely Ruchni and there's no Sheikhis to Gashmias B'chlal, so therefore wasn't Nitvas on Har Sinai any Kedusha B'chlal, and the Kedusha Torah was specifically in Torah itself. However, the Avodah of the Beis Hamikdash has Sheikh somewhat to Gashmias and Nitvas on the Choyme, the Nyone Avodah, so therefore that's Niskayim, the Kedusha L'Olam Vod. So according to this, Reb Michal explains that's the beer in Rashi, that Rashi understood that Ziv HaChochma, it's not possible to be moisif on Kovid HaTorah with Gashmias, with money and the like. It's impossible to be moisif on Kovid HaTorah. It's not nitvas on the Torah K'doshe Nyone Gashmias B'chlal. So therefore Rashi says Lo Yadana Mahi Ziv HaChochma. However, by Ziv HaKuna it's shaykh to be moisif on the Kovid HaKuna with Inyoni Gashmi. So therefore Rashi explained a kohen that's a osher and it's mechabed other kohenim with his matnas kuna. And the Michal says another pshat that could be by matnas kuna. He gave matnas kuna to others in order that the matnas kuna shouldn't come to the noise, which is not shaykh by Ziv HaChochma B'chlal. And the Michal says, although we find in the Gemara in Chulin Daf Kuf Lamed Daled by Rosh Hashiva Gadlei Mishalochiv, that's in order that Dvor V'Yehei Nishmoyin, but it's not milesa the Kovid HaTorah B'chlal. It's not a mile in Kovid HaTorah the fact that he has money. Moving further on, the Mishnah says the Ikvus to the Mashiach is Pnei Hador K'Pnei HaKelev. Rashi says in Sanhedrin that they're not Mizbaishim Zem Mizeh. Eine B'chonen Kovitz Mamorim. That brings a pshat from Yisrael Salante that understanding in Pnei Hador K'Pnei HaKelev is that the Kelev, the door, goes in front of its master and leads its master, but always looks back at the master and gets direction from the master of where he should be going to lead his master. He says that's the understanding. In the manhigim of the door, ba'akvisi the Mashiach, they won't be leading the door with their own seichel and their own dastoyel. They'll be looking back at the Yidden, at the Klal, to get direction from the Klal of how to lead the Klal. And he brings another pshat from the Chavetz Chaim, that the Chavetz Chaim explained that a kelev, when he gets hit, he goes and bites the stick, and he doesn't realize that it's not the stick that hit him, rather the person that was holding the stick hit him. So he says the same thing by Pnei Hador, Pnei HaKelev. They don't understand that any sorrow or oynish that comes on them is from a Kodesh Baruch Hu. They only look at the actual sorrow themselves, like the Kelev that looks at the stick that hit him and don't look at the Kodesh Baruch Hu. Moving for the Gemara says that Yosef said, "Leisisni anova, don't say that on this battle anova because ha'ika anov." And Sefer Mishma Levi brings that the Nesivos HaKodesh Zechoyin Levracha went and asked the Biskrov, what's the understanding in this Gemara? How could it be Rabbi Yosef would say on himself that he's an Onov? Is that the derech of Anivas? Anivas is to be humble, and if he's saying you are humble, that's a stira to Anivas. So the Biskrov answered him, then I don't understand, and you don't understand what the real chashivas and understanding an anova is, and therefore we can't discuss such a kasha. And someone told the Biskarov that Bemis the Mashah asked the kasha, and the Biskarov was very bothered that how could it be the Mashah would ask such a kasha, and he opened the Mashah over here, and the Mashah does not ask the kasha. The Mashah says it's not the derech of Chachomim li'espoil l'shtabeach atzmam Ra'ali alucha zor v'loy mipicho, and the Mashal explains that the reason why Yabis said ha'ika no is because there shouldn't be a tois in the memro to say botla anovo, and he says another pshat that in that door it wasn't a shvach to say that he has anovo, because at that door it was said Yirei Achet Yimosu. Eine Sefer Ali Ber that brings a very interesting Chassam Sefer in Ksubis that says that there's two different levels of Anovo. There's one level of Anovo that's by Moshe Rabbeinu and Rabbeinu HaKodesh, that they looked at themselves that they don't have any shvach b'chlal, and looked at everyone greater than them. Then there's another level when you understand that you have gedula and greatness, but you don't look at it that you deserve any credit, and you always being machshav others and annoyed with shiftless copy others, and that's the darga of HaKadosh Baruch Hu v'ayin sham.